week we'll be looking back. We'll be looking to the history of missions. In Unit 3, we're going to be giving just a momentary glimpse at what happened earlier in history that really set the stage for our missions movement today. Now, you may be like me, and maybe you're not a real history buff. In fact, I remember in college at Baylor University, history was the course I made the lowest grade in because, boy, there's dates and there's places and there's names, and how do you keep it all straight? Well, please don't get bogged down in the tedious detail of history, but let the Lord teach you through this brief overview of the history of missions, the amazing work that He's done through people consistently to bring us to our point in time today. And aren't we grateful that it's our turn in history to take the baton of missions and to carry it for our phase of the relay race, and then to be ready to pass it on to the next generation. So this week we are going to be talking a bit about history, and I pray that something as you read and study and talk and think about history, and especially the history of missions, will really connect with an interest that you have more than anything, so that you'll be able to hold on to it in your own mind and share it with enthusiasm with others. The thing that I try to keep in mind when I consider the history of missions is what are the basic lessons we can learn from history. One is that God's faithfulness is unending, because certainly as we see not only in the Bible but in history, the history of the church, we see that even though sometimes missionaries encountered great challenges, that God has been faithful and He'll continue to be faithful in and through us. The second thing I learned from an overview of the history of missions is that God's plans may not look like my plans, but guess what? If it's God's plans, that's the best. And so I pray that even as you look at history, you see some surprising things that God did through people who were taking the gospel to those who were lost. A third insight from a study of history of missions is that God's providence covers His work around the world. And that is an amazing promise for us to cling to, that God is with us wherever we go. And I've experienced that personally as I've traveled by faith to do ministry and missions around the world. God has been with me in such a real way, and I know He will do that with you. He'll be with you where He sends you. Number 4 is that God's zeal is that His passion is that no one would perish. So our work in missions will never end, because there's always going to be lost people who need to hear the gospel. And then a final lesson from the history of missions is that God's goal is really for every nation, every tribe, and every tongue to hear that through faith in Jesus Christ, they too can be saved. And what an amazing thought that each one of us can be a part of God's great mission here on earth. So this week, don't get bogged down in the history. Just remember that God is a part of the history of the past, the history of the present, and the history of the future. God bless.